Just looking ahead, you're right with the games coming up with Toronto is a big one. I think that's you circle and look at and say that's like a true test game. That's going to be interesting with the lesser lineup. But how much do you think we should read out of the results of that game? I was impressed by the Bruins last night, kind of avoiding any revenge talk and sidestepping
Yeah.
that whole thing and basically saying it's not going to change what happened last year, as far as that game. And I just think at the end of the day, that win over Florida was just their highest quality win of the season. And the biggest win as far as sort of confirming and minting them as a true legit team, like a legit quality team in the NHL, where they went up against so many Western Conference cream puffs in the first few weeks. And it was hard to say that, when they were winning those games. But I think that game against Toronto was another one that is going to be in the measuring stick, kind of like, this is where this team is at. This is the statement to the rest of the league that the Bruins are legit and for real. Anything that you're sort of like looking forward to watching or reading into in that game coming up, which is they're always entertaining and fun rivalry games.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at obviously Toronto's, their whole game revolves around that offense, which is tough to corral. So I think obviously seeing how, again, the Bruins, I think have done a good job. You look at even like Detroit was flying high. They had a really strong power play. They were 0 for 4 in that game. Like they've done a really good job at shutting down the strengths of teams, especially on the offensive zone. So if they can, again, easier said than done, but slowing down Toronto's offense would be a big key for them, even without a guy like McAvoy. We'll see if maybe again, Hampus Lindholm played his best hockey last year when McAvoy was out of the lineup, and he kind of was the do-it-all guy. So I think
Yep.
getting him going, especially in the offensive zone, would be a huge plus for them. But I think for me, the biggest thing moving forward, and it's what we talked about earlier on, Joe, is the ceiling of this team depends on how much offensive generation they can get, and you're still trying to see where those pieces fall into place. I mean, feels like every single game now, Montgomery is shuffling up his lines, and I don't even know what are his lines right now in terms of what's the best case or who
Yeah.
fits where. So seeing that continue to build, see where a guy like Patra settles in, whether they think he's with Zaka and Pasternak, whether they think he's with Geeky, all those things. I think is something worth noting. And if guys like him, I think a guy like Jake DeBrusk, you need to get him going. You need that more 5-on-5 scoring punch. Those are the things that I think are the most important thing. I think we know night in, night out, you'll have the odd game, maybe not as uh, disastrous as that Anaheim game, but you're going to have the odd game where they give up 3 or 4 goals. But I think the biggest thing is, their defensive goaltending is going to be pretty strong night in and night out. It's whether or not the offense can continue to extend leads, build themselves some breathing room, those things. So I think that's where you have to watch moving forward, especially against Toronto. That I don't know what happened with Joseph Wall, but he's been unbelievable out of the gate. So
Yeah, and that's like basically that's really what the Leafs needed, and that's what they
yeah,
were missing is something like that. And that makes them a more complete team if they can have somebody that consistently can just, stand in there and stop pucks and do what needs to be done and be the backbone for that team, because obviously they have the offensive firepower. They've had that for years. And it's going to be an interesting game. I like you lament the loss of Lucic for that
yeah,
game, because I was looking forward to Lucic Reeves making a statement to each other in the first game that they were going to play. I think it's a classic though, like strength against strength, matchup, offensive firepower, dynamic run and gun hockey from Toronto, defense and goaltending for the Bruins. Yes, they're going to be definitely missing a bunch of players. I think a bunch of key guys. But I still think they have the ability to play the way that they want to play. It's going to be another Hampus Lindholm, probably 28 to 30 minute spectacular, like it was in that game against
yeah.
Florida. He logged a lot of ice time. Carlo and Forbort were over 23 minutes too, and that's asking a lot out of all of those guys. But that's the way it's going to go, I think, until they get Grzelcyk and McAvoy back. So I think that's going to be a really good game. As far as the odd game, yeah, I agree. Like you're going to have games like Anaheim, especially like when the schedule sort of like hits you with the
Yeah.
almost scheduled loss feel kind of game that you thought going into it that was going to be anyway. I actually was impressed by the way that they played in that game, just given the situation, coming back from a West Coast trip with multiple time changes. First game back is usually a hot mess. I thought it was they almost pulled it off. But
Exactly.
that mess came out in the last 5 minutes of the game.
Fanduel is the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. Fanduel, official partner of the NFL.
Against Detroit a couple nights later, they were pretty much in the exact same situation, and they're going to be in that situation a lot this year. 2-1 game in the third period. They gave up the goal, and all of a sudden Detroit is really coming at them with everything they have, feeling like they're going to be able to do what Anaheim did. And then Pastrnak steps up and makes a few plays. And, that's what you're going to need is something like that. But I thought it was really important and encouraging that you saw the Bruins respond in a totally different way the second time around against Detroit, against another, good team that's playing really, really good hockey this year, and be able to win that game and then find ways to get through it. Like, I think that's, the sign of a good team. And I really liked, just like at the end, the way Pastrnak got rewarded for making the right play off the boards to clear the puck with the net. Like, exactly what Jim Montgomery had been talking about the previous game that they were not doing and that they did wrong, and that was a problem when the net was empty. Instead, he does the right thing. He clears the puck off the boards, banks it off the boards, and like the hockey gods make sure it trickles into the net. Like, that's getting rewarded for making the right plays and doing the right thing. And that is really good to see. And again, in the game against Florida, after the first period, they all talked about it after the game was over. They made an adjustment. They were trying to be too fancy going through the middle of the ice with the passing and the transition plays to try to get zone entries. And it was very obvious to watch. You could see it during the game, where it just turned it into a dump and chase game, where they were just throwing pucks from deep in the neutral zone once they got over the red line behind the Florida net, and then just like attacking them with forecheckers. And it's, meat and potatoes hockey. It's boring hockey. It's not like what they want to play, but you knew it was going to be effective, and it was the proper adjustment, and the Bruins bought in and adjusted exactly the way they were supposed to. Really, one of the only times after the first period that they did anything, through the middle of the neutral zone that was at all, fancy was Zacha hitting Pastrnak on the run, full speed, when they went in and scored on the McAvoy goal. That was one of the few times they even attempted that. Most of the time, they were just like blinders on, throwing the puck cross corner dump and go get it with the forecheckers. So like, I'm also, I think Jim Montgomery this year is being forced to do more coaching, and forced, as like you mentioned, changing up the lines all the time, like making all of these adjustments, like doing things a little bit differently with the crew that he has. And we're seeing even more, I think, out of him from a coaching standpoint. And, probably going to end up being an even more Jack Adams worthy effort that he's going to put in this year than last year with the horses that he had, that he's going to have to work behind the bench. But I'm even getting more impressed watching Jim Montgomery this year in a much more challenging situation for him than he was put in last year with that Bruins team.
Yeah, I mean, you look at last year, how many times did he mention, the opportunity that he kind of was able to walk into a locker room that was commanded by so many guys that have been there forever, like Bergeron and Marchand Krejci. And, he's mentioned Bergeron countless times before, how he was almost an extension of the coaching staff, right? He was almost the go-to liaison you can kind of lean to in terms of getting kind of the temperature of the room. And it's not to say that is now completely gone and that, Marchand's closing the door on these guys, but it's definitely impressive to see him, switch things up a lot more. And I think adjust on the fly. This is a team that I think Jim Montgomery wants them to play with pace, wants them to be a lot more shot selective. But when you've got a team that also maybe doesn't have as much finishing talent, or you're still trying to find the cohesion, maybe it's about simplifying things. Maybe it's about just getting pucks on net and letting guys like James and Rinkside get, opportunities at the net front. Like, it's all about, I think what makes a good coach is when you have a set game plan, you have a way that you want your team to play, but it's also hockey. Shit happens, and you have to adjust it on the fly and work with what you have. And hopefully you're able to have your team build into what I think your overall vision is for that roster, right? I think that's what makes good coaches kind of envisioning that and getting to that product maybe by the end of the year. But it's always a work in progress for every single team. So to have him do that and switch things up and, maybe change stray from kind of the strengths of what he thinks his roster is just to get them to where they are right now and incorporate that more and more. Yeah, that has been really impressive in terms of how he's worked with the team that, again, I don't think a lot of us expected them to be